Welcome to another episode of Open Range. My name is Patrick Hart. I'll be your guest host today. Of course, special thanks to Gary Emineth for allowing us to have this time on his show. Special thanks to Beck and also those incredible sponsors that pay for the lights in the studio. If we haven't met, my name is Patrick Hart, contractor here locally in Bismarck. Get dirty for a living. We actually call him Dirty Pat when I take the suit coat off. And I grew up on a farm, grew up with a community, and I grew up understanding the value of helping each other in society. And, as we're getting through this campaign season, what I'd like to let you guys know is that, there's this political divide, but really, we're all just a bunch of working class people here in North Dakota, and we all want the same thing. Unfortunately, I feel like we have at times given our power away to corporations and lobbies. And when I talk to people on both sides of the aisle, Democrat, Republican, or I don't really have a preference, what everyone wants is simply freedom and justice. And I don't think they want to be angry anymore. And at the end of the day, we need to move forward. And many of the candidates that I've interviewed and we've brought in, they're just solutions focused candidates whose main message is that they're listening to your needs. Now, these politicians aren't out there telling you what you need. They're simply asking you what and how you think the system should be fixed. And these are the type of candidates I think should be in charge of representing you in our state government. This week, I have Senator Mathern coming from District 11 in Fargo and Rissa Williams coming from District 31, where you're a candidate for House, right?
Yes.
Excellent. Now, Rissa, I when I was writing my intro, was thinking about a story you told about your son this week. And he said, I went to this, was that his first political event on
No,
Tuesday?
he's my son when he says, "Are you going to this event?" That wasn't the case this time.
Yeah.
I voluntold him he was coming as my plus one, and we were at a Dem-NPL fundraiser, and he said, "You guys aren't angry enough." He's 25, and it just kind of stopped me, and I said, of course I'm angry and frustrated. And I said, one, that was a friendly crowd. They were there to support us, so we don't need to be angry, and we were singing to the choir. We don't need to yell at the crowd.
Right.
But I wanted to take in his comment and process it, because 25-year-olds are angry. They're angry, they're frustrated, and they feel like they're not being heard. So now I'm thinking, what do we do with that anger? And I told him, yes, of course we're angry, but we're channeling it. We're putting in the work, because you can't just run around angry and yelling and alienating everybody. We have to come up with solutions. We have to be productive. And so you take that anger and frustration and you turn it into work.
Absolutely.
And you use it to energize the work, because this is hard work. It's a long haul. Door knocking is intimidating, but it's been wonderful. I go knock on doors and people say, "Thank you for being here. We've been waiting for someone to show up." And everyone is tired of the fighting. We're all tired of it.
Absolutely. Senator Mathern, have you been door knocking? You've been in your district for your whole life, though, correct?
Yes, and I've been in the Senate for 40 years, but I've been door knocking, and I'm shocked at the difference in door knocking over the past few years.
Yes.
I am finding in my neighborhood houses that are boarded up. People who don't know their neighbors. And people working 2 jobs. So it's been enlightening to me, though I've done it many times. It's important for me to do door knocking so I get the feel of people and understand what they're dealing with. We're spending a lot of money in Bismarck, and I think sometimes we forget about the concerns of affordability of our common citizens. How are we going to pay that rising insurance bill? How are we going to pay that rising tax bill? how are we going to pay for that rising food bill, that rising electrical bill? And so that's one of the reasons that I've gotten involved in this issue of our data centers. I just want to make sure that North Dakotans get a clean, accurate, fair situation. And it's not companies coming in and taking out everything for profits that are spent someplace in New York.
That seems pretty basic to me.
Yeah.
I recently had a conversation with the former director of ITD, and I said, how long is this going to last? Like, you're in it. Your whole career has been computers. What do you think these data centers are going to last? And I said 2045, 2050. He said 2035. These are going to come and go in the blink of an eye. And I thought, man, we're taking thousands of acres out of production. We're building these huge, ginormous, infrastructures. And 10 years, 12 years doesn't seem like a long time. So I think we need reclamation on that.
Yeah. There's 4,000 centers already built in the United States. It looks like there'll be another 4,000 coming on board. And they wanted to come to North Dakota because we have water, we have energy, we have land, and we have cold temperatures. So we are a target for these organizations, and we don't have enough laws in place to protect our property and our citizens. And I agree with you, Pat, that this could be a bubble. I mean, what you're talking about there in terms of years, that's really considered a bubble. That's not considered like a 100-year industry. That's raising the question of who's going to reclaim this property? Are there agreements in place so that when the industry is gone, we're taking care of that land? Going north of here, it's fascinating to see that the mounds yet out there from coal development, and how we destroy thousands and thousands of acres until we finally put together some reclamation laws. But they don't cover everything. There's a lot of wasted land yet. And that's the concern I have. North Dakota should not become the wasteland of these out-of-state corporations. And then you and I got to live here.
Right.
And so I look forward to what the special session is going to do to protect our citizens.
Now we'll just jump into it. We got a couple minutes left this segment. You got a bill through legislative committee to be heard in the special session. Is that correct? There's 20 bills submitted and only 5 came through?
Right. The 5 deal with Kratom, property tax fix, and data centers. And one of the things, and then the veterans situation of the building at the Capitol grounds. But one of the things in data centers is non-disclosure agreements. We have found that there are companies making agreements with public officials, elected and in government staff persons, to not disclose their negotiations, not disclose their agreements until they're all done. So we've got citizens that are just finding out a data center is coming up, and somebody has been making deals for a year in the background.
Sure.
So the bill basically says non-disclosure agreements are done. We're not to have them anymore. If you're going to make a negotiation or a deal with a public official, that ought to be record open. That negotiations ought to be available to everybody. If it's a good deal, it should meet the light of day.
Right.
And so this bill now is going to be heard by the special session on September 2nd.
Okay.
And we added a day for citizen input on September 1st. A lot of people concerned out there It's interesting. I heard a lot of things about the one being planned in North Mandan. So there's controversy all over the state. It's a statewide issue.
Absolutely. What else do you expect to really come out of special session? Is this, and maybe let me reframe that question. Do you think this special session is really about kratom use?
I really think it's about other issues too. I question the governor calling a special session on kratom use. You know, that's a substance that we need to regulate, and it is serious. We have many of those. Frankly, more people die from alcoholism, more people die from smoking than in kratom use. And so I think there's another few issues in the background. And if we had a special session every time there's a new substance out there, we'd be in session all the time.
Right.
You know, these people that are dealing with poisonous substances to get people high and give people mental experiences or pain relief. These companies are working all the time. And we need to get to the basics of how we're going to educate our citizens to keep them outside of this kind of use, how to treat our citizens when they do. And that's the basic role of government, not coming into session every day when there's a new substance.
Good to hear from you. Patrick Hart signing off for this segment. We'll catch you after this commercial break with Senator Mathern and Rissa Williams. Thanks for sticking around that commercial break. My name is Patrick Hart, and I'm joined today on Open Range with Rissa Williams, House candidate for District 31, and of course, Senator Tim Mathern. Now, Rissa, we've had you on before, so we kind of know your background. We know why you're running. What have you been hearing? What have you shifted on or maybe picked up throughout your candidacy, throughout the couple months since we've seen you?
A big one right now, I mean, the data centers is huge, and I call that the great unifying event.
Okay.
Because we're all in agreement that it needs to be discussed. It needs to be, I have this, I try not to give power to my fears, but I fear that the public is going to have a very strong unified voice, and that will be ignored because of the lack of representation, which I know you've probably battled, Senator Mathern, where you have a voice of reason and it just gets shut down. So personally, I don't spend a lot of time on data centers because I think it's being well covered. And there are so many other concerns. Sometimes it almost feels like a smokescreen.
Sure.
Not that it's not real, it's very real. But I don't want the other issues to fall by the wayside in the meantime. You mentioned the kratom, and if it's being used as a mind-altering substance and pain relief, how about if we address the underlying issues and healthcare and mental health? And I mentioned that Bismarck still doesn't have a detox facility. There is the ER and there is jail. And it's been in the works for years. Senator Mathern said that St. Alexis was given a $10 million award for a detox facility. But as far as I know, it's not open yet. Maybe it is, that would be wonderful. It's a good start. But last I knew, North Dakota was still one of the top states for binge drinking. And I don't drink at all anymore. I just don't like the feeling. I don't need to be under any mind-altering substances. Life is great. But I understand why people feel the need to numb themselves, or, you know, when there's not enough activities for kids to get involved in and they start drinking for fun, and then it just turns into this cycle.
Yeah.
With healthcare, I have VA healthcare, and that came about with the Affordable Care Act, where all veterans, there is some financial, you have to be financially eligible, but I have universal health care for the rest of my life as long as it's not taken away. And that has been life-changing for me because my healthcare no longer depends on my employment. I have all of these part-time jobs with no benefits. And healthcare should not be dependent on employment.
Absolutely.
It should be a human right. And, we're doing these things to make it affordable, unaffordable. Oh, I can't afford my premiums. Somebody's making an awful lot of money off of healthcare, and people are just trying to survive.
Sure. Now, I'll tell you, I'm going to bring up this word. Everyone says socialism, right? Socialism, it's like a boogeyman in the media these days. And I want to get away from that, even though I interjected it right away. I think there's some industries that should have some sort of government function in them. And, maybe the prison system, the educational system, the healthcare system. I don't think it's bad to have the government involved in that, because do we really as a society need to profit from people being in jail? I think absolutely not. And I think maybe healthcare should lean into that a little bit more.
At this point, government is also kind of a boogeyman. And one of my principles of my campaign is representation. And a government of, by, and for the people is us.
Yeah.
We are supposed to be self-governing. And to sit at a table with Senator Mathern again and think of him as a peer, first of all, I'm honored to be here with you. But he's a person with this life experience in the education. I'm a person with life experience in education, and I'm bringing my real world experience to the table to represent my neighbors. And none of us have been represented for far too long. People who use hospitals should have a say in how they're run. People who use schools should have a say in how they're run. And that is the whole point of our constitutional government.
The word socialism really just encompasses the concept that each person has worth, but to have worth and to actually be able to express your worth, you have to have food, shelter, education, healthcare, and a decent paying job. Those 5 things are what we all need. And socialism is really just a way that we figure out where all of these needs are met. Because if you don't have those 5 basic things, you really can't shine.
Sure.
You really can't have a quality life. You really can't help other people. And so I think the goal that we have is to address society in a way that those 5 needs are met. And that takes us working together.
Well, certainly. And I've heard this term that I can't get rid of, which is a solutions-focused candidate. And I'll give my guy, Mike Thiessen, up in Minot credit for coming up with that one. But like I said in my intro, all of our candidates are out talking to people saying, how can we improve society? How can we make the government look or work better for you? And I love that so much more than being told what to believe in, what we should be concentrating on by our politicians. So I give you guys all kudos for being out there, knocking the doors and talking to your constituents.
Yeah, glad to do it.
Someone has gotten it in our heads that only qualified people should be running the government. And constitutionally, that is not our government. Our government is designed to be run as written, of, by, and for the people. And to have people tell you, we know what's best for you, and then do what's best for themselves. The elderly can't work, children can't work, people with physical needs can't work. They still have the same inherent value. They should still be fed. They should still be sheltered. They should still be educated. I see special needs kids at school, and once upon a time they weren't in the schools. And it doesn't matter if they can pick up a pencil and write penmanship. They deserve to be in a social setting and receiving input. And I worked with a boy last year that I didn't know he could read in 8th grade. His aide had stepped out of the room, and there was a little bit too much time where he was sitting there entertaining himself. So I just picked up a book and sat with him, and he read it to me, and I was blown away because he's not my normal student, my regular student, and I didn't know he had that ability. We have to meet people where they are. And as I said, everyone has inherent value. It doesn't matter. Not everyone contributes financially, or not everyone can build a home or a deck. Not everyone can introduce legislation, but we all deserve to be here and be cared for.
Right.
And that shouldn't be debatable. That shouldn't be a difficult thing to understand.
Well, I think that's ever so more important in North Dakota because we have a significantly aging population and we have a significantly rural population. If we keep seeing these cuts to our healthcare system, Langdon and Larimore and Hettinger have significant regional hospitals that could possibly disappear. That's going to be a significant blow. I couldn't imagine Langdon without the facility they have.
Yeah. We have about 30 critical access hospitals. These are rural hospitals in North Dakota. We have 6 big hospitals, and then all of these, what we call critical access. And they are right now dealing with a reduced reimbursement coming forward from Medicaid that comes about because of the big, beautiful bill that was passed by Congress. And so the challenge they have is, how do they serve people in the rural area if the reimbursement is lower than their cost of operation? So that's the challenge. Now, there are also challenges about our population and the decreasing population in our rural areas. And I think in some ways, we should heighten our research in our universities in terms of how can we actually empower communities to do things that keep our young people. We have been doing a lot of research on how big your combine can be, how big the header can be, and how many more acres you can cover with equipment. And we got to the point where most of the crops now don't even deliver into food.
Sure.
We got rural communities don't have a grocery store, and they're surrounded by, they grow soybeans and corn and sometimes another crop. Well, I think in part that has become the case because of our research and where we're putting our dollars. There are other ways. How do we have small companies? How do we grow vegetables? How do we have, different ways of dealing with agriculture and our crops and our products? And I think that's another challenge we have, making sure that we have people in the rural areas. It's a situation, where rural areas just don't grow crops and cattle. They grow values. They grow what you talked about, Pat, caring for one another. And those values are important, and we need to grow more of them.
Absolutely. I'm sorry we got to cut to commercial break. We'll be back soon with Rissa Williams and Senator Tim Mathern. Welcome back. Thanks for sticking through that commercial break. If you're just tuning in, my name is Patrick Hart, and I'm here today with Rissa Williams, who's a House candidate in District 31, which is Mandan West.
Grant County, Sioux County, Hettinger County, and part of Morton County. We have 4 counties.
Oh my gosh. And we have Senator Tim Mathern, which is, I'll say, Fargo Core South.
Yes.
Is that fair?
Yes. And I could walk my district all in one morning, and she takes 4 months to walk her district.
Well,
but it's the same population.
Yes.
Well, before the commercial break, we were talking about kind of the need to really give the time and the resources to our rural communities so that they can continue being rural North Dakota. Rissa, I know you're really amped up and excited about healthcare. What are your thoughts on how we can do that?
Senator Mathern mentioned rural healthcare and the 6 large hospitals in North Dakota and the critical access hospitals in the smaller communities. I have been to many of those critical access hospitals, and I know that in rural EMS, it can take us 25 to 30 minutes just to get to the patient because they're 30 miles out. So many of these small towns, if they're lucky, they have a quick response unit and they're CPR certified volunteer firefighters show up in a truck with a bag and they'll do CPR. In CPR, I'm also a CPR instructor. In CPR, in action, after 2 minutes, someone taps you out and someone else, if the 3 of us were in a room, I would go, it's 5 rounds of CPR, 30 compressions. And so you do 5 sets of 30 and then the next person steps in. That's 2 minutes and it's exhausting. You get tired quick. And if you're 30 minutes out and you don't have 10 people to do chest compressions before we even get there, much less get you to the critical access hospital 30 minutes back. That's kind of a crisis.
Yeah.
And, people are on the family farm for 4 generations and the nearest ambulance is 30 minutes away. We have to do better. And if that means as a community, a government, we decide we're going to make sure the education is there and someone in the community has the access to a vehicle and equipment to get to you within 10 minutes, and also the community education so that your family members know how to do chest compressions, that's going to increase our odds of survival. Otherwise, how do we help people?
One of the things that has been happening is we have the rural transformation dollars. Essentially, when the president wanted to get the big, beautiful bill passed, the only way he could get it passed is putting $1 billion to every state for rural transformation. I mean, it's kind of a ridiculous policy to give every state the same amount of money. I mean, North Dakota gets $1 billion and California gets $1 billion. I mean, the difference in our population is dramatic. However, we got the $1 billion on the table, so let's make good use of it in North Dakota. And that means providing some new dollars to rural areas in healthcare. And so some of it's going to be going to critical access hospital. It's going to be going to the emergency services. But there's another piece, Candidate Williams, you noted, our education for our citizens. What is also happening is we have many rural citizens going around their critical access. They're starting to go directly to the big 6. And we have to find out what's going on there, because not only do we need that critical access hospital, we need patients to use it. I mean, we have critical access hospitals that have like 1 patient or 0 patients, but is fully staffed. So it's a 2-way street. We have to figure out from people in your district, what is it going to take to make sure they're comfortable in using their critical access hospital? And then we as a state have to make the proper investments. We started, for example, family practice residencies in North Dakota. We found out that the best way to get a physician in a small community is to make sure there's a residency there. They can go there and practice. And it's kind of interesting. The best way to keep them there is they fall in love with somebody locally. and that's what keeps a practitioner in a local area. They develop a family bond, they develop that community
Connection.
relationship.
Yep.
And so we need to do more of those things. I've said at one point, maybe we'd be better off starting a dating service, so we get some of these professionals to marry into some of these rural communities. That's what's going to keep them alive and keep the professional services there. But, outside of humor, we have this practical challenge. We want them to have healthcare there, and we want practitioners there. But I think, I'm impressed that you're an EMS person. That almost needs to be common education
I agree.
for everybody in rural areas. And, if a farmer can figure out the computers of what's in a combine, maybe they can figure out how to do what you do in EMS.
A good way to spend some of that money would be community education. And, we need to not overlook those small things of, we need to build this community medical center up, but we also need to build the community up and educate the community. EMS is, I joke that I accidentally started driving an ambulance during COVID. I called the number on the flyer and it said, we will have to close our doors if we don't get some volunteers.
Oh, wow.
And I had served on several committees in the Bismarck-Mandan area. And I called the number and I said, I'm a lifelong volunteer. I'm not currently serving on any committees. How can I help? And my manager eventually said, well, you can drive. And I said, drive what? You make deliveries? And she said, kind of. And so I started delivering patients to the local critical access hospital. And my first major accident scene, there was a rollover, and I stood there. A CPR driver is the basic qualification to be an EMS. And you are literally, you drive, you do CPR, and you can hand people things, but no patient care other than CPR. And so I'm on this accident scene, and I'm standing there holding equipment, waiting for someone to need it. And I said, I need more skills. I'm not a stand around person. I need to get in there and help. And actually, that reminds me of how you and I met. I'll get back to that. Volunteering. So I went and found a couple classes, and first I became an EMT for 2 years, and then I became an advanced EMT. And now I've been advanced for 2 years. I just renewed that license for another 2. Someday I get to retire, but in the meantime, I'll keep working multiple jobs. And I love EMS. Most of us do. It's hugely rewarding. I had a call recently, and one of my paramedic friends said, did you win? And no, we didn't. We lost. We lost that one. And it's hard, but the care you give the rest of the family in that moment,
Sure.
that's how you still win, is
Sure.
you extend the compassion to the rest of the family. You work as a team. To see the team come together and work, and 8 people in a room, all dedicated to this one person's survival, it's hugely rewarding to be involved in that. Even when you lose,
Sure.
you still get to see the teamwork. And then you see afterwards, the people go out and again, extend the compassion to the family. And it's just a whole process. And people don't think about it, until you're in it. And I have a lot of pride in the service where I work and the quality of the people. It's just remarkable. You and I, how much time do we have?
I got about 2 minutes.
Okay. The last time you and I sat at a table, I reminded you of the first time we met. And Senator Mathern and I were both AmeriCorps volunteers.
Oh.
So you were Peace Corps,
Vista.
and I was a Reading Corps reading tutor.
Oh.
That was my first Bismarck Public Schools job.
Okay.
So yeah, they're, simultaneously for me, EMS and schools. I go back to school tomorrow. As I shared with you, I think I gave your son a CPR demo in 7th grade science.
Yeah.
I love teaching CPR to kids. They just really grab onto it. And again, it's so important. Kids can do chest compressions. They have a lot more energy than we have, but they can do quality chest compressions. And from the time they're big enough, so maybe 10 or 12, we can start educating them on basic first aid and CPR.
Well, absolutely. And I really liked your comment, Senator Mathern, about, I grew up in a small town and we drove by the critical access hospitals. We just developed relationships in Grand Forks, and then we started driving to Fargo, and now my parents just go straight to Minneapolis. And I think that's valuable that you said, you got to kind of use them or lose them. If you don't use those rural hospitals, they're going to disappear. And I tell you, we got to jump to break in a couple seconds, but I've been learning a lot too about telehealth. I think telehealth is a great idea, but there's that inpatient care, that looking at each other eye to eye, that isn't necessarily garnered in that relationship. So it's a couple ideas on rural healthcare. We're going to cut to commercial break really quick. We'll be back in just a couple moments. Senator Tim Mathern, Rissa Williams running for House in District 31. Welcome back, viewers. Thanks for making it through that commercial break. My name is Patrick Hart. Thank you all again, Gary Emineth, for giving us this opportunity on a show Open Range. This week, we have Rissa Williams, candidate for District 31, and Senator Tim Mathern, representing Core South Fargo. Now, Tim, before we left, you were talking about your time in the Peace Corps. Can you maybe expand on that and tell us about that experience?
Well, it was a very important experience in my life. I actually was not in the official government Peace Corps. I was in a program, a mission program, where I went to Mexico for 3 summers. And it was during that time that, while I was involved in a mission activity, I came to the conclusion that there were children coming to school who were hungry. There were children coming to school who had health problems. Some couldn't even see because of eye sores and things like that. And that experience led me to recognize our public policy responsibility. Now, it's really wonderful to patch somebody's wound or give them something to eat. With that experience, I feel good. The giver feels good.
Right.
However, the greater need is figuring out, why does that person have sores? Why is that person hungry? And what are we doing about that? So my experience in those mission activities, I think, were formative in coming to see the good that we do within a continuum. I would say charity and justice. They both have value. Charity is in the side of helping an individual. Justice is in the side of making public policy so that each and every person has food, shelter, education, healthcare, and a decent paying job. And that means changing systems. And guess what? That means politics. And politics is not a dirty word. Politics is how we figure this out. Politics is really the art of making public policy.
Yes.
So when someone says, well, I don't want anything to do with politics, or politicians are dirty, politics is uncomfortable, well, that's because we have made it that way. Let us change our reference. Let us say, politics is really different points of view coming to the table. And it's expressed in, we have a Democrat Party, we have a Republican Party, we have other parties. but they're dealing with politics because that makes public policy.
Right.
And it's in public policy that we figure out, why does this kid not have food? Why does this kid not have education? Why do these elderly people, why are they alone in rural North Dakota? And so that experience helped me come to that. I was also a Vista volunteer for a year before I got in politics. And my role in Vista was working with Indigenous people, Native American Center, to develop services and programs to serve people. I've actually been involved in social work for over 50 years.
Sure.
But the roots of it come to that mission experience. Thanks for asking.
Well, no, I think that is very valuable, especially again in what we want from our candidates and from our politicians. And I think you really reaffirmed that fact that you want to give back. You want to make the world a better place. And I think that's so refreshing because oftentimes we see what you referred to as the politicians that have been made dirty and, you know, the money in politics. And I think it's really great that we have that core guiding principles of just helping people. And, you know, that's all I want to do is help people, help make the world a better place. I'll make my money somewhere else. But so thank you for leaning in like that. Now, really, so we got about 10 minutes left. We got this special session coming up. I'm going to maybe pivot back to that if that's all right. Rissa, you going to special session? You going to sit in the balcony with me?
I start school tomorrow.
Okay.
I go back to school tomorrow. So my schedule, I love my routine, but now that takes priority.
Of course.
So I will be going to some of the public meetings in the afternoons.
Okay.
But the special session I will have to miss and just see what comes out in the public media. Another word that's been made to be awful, but how else do we get our information?
Oh, this is it right here. This is
Yes.
the public media.
Well, I would encourage you to take a group of your students and come to the North Dakota Senate and watch our debate. Even a short time, an hour, might help your students understand politics moving to public policy. And it might engender in some of them the idea that they want to do this someday.
Because someone has
So-
to come after us.
We'll invite you and we'll have you
I
sit
have a
with
couple
us.
teachers in mind. I'll talk to a couple 8th grade history teachers and see. One of them I could text as soon as we leave here
Great.
and say, hey, we've been invited. Can we make it happen?
Senator, what are maybe some of your expectations that are going to come out of this special session coming up?
Well, I think one of the points of debate will be the funding of the Veterans Gallery. We put over $15 million in it already. We put in a condition of putting 39 million if the nonprofit organizations raise 39 million, and they all agreed. I still remember all the generals saying, and from the Guard saying, we can raise this money, we can do this. And now the money has not been raised. And so we got an empty building going up on the Capitol grounds. So how should that be paid for? Should we say, well, we'll just keep it empty? Somebody didn't keep the word. Somebody didn't manage it properly. And maybe it's an eyesore, but it's a lesson for us. Maybe we should have required it to be managed in a different way. I mean, it's an executive agency.
Sure.
And I'm a little bit concerned, and most citizens don't really know this, but we also bailed out the presidential library in Medora. Everybody thinks all the money was raised. We had the president come in. All the legislators got pre-tours before July 4th. But guess what? The citizens put in $70 million in our last special session,
Oh, wow.
or it wouldn't have opened. We put another $50 million in before in an endowment fund. So I think there'll be discussion about that. And now citizens are finding out they show up at the library and they're charged $26 to go in.
Sure.
So anyway, that process, how do we get to this point, will be debated. We'll also pass some bills probably about kratom. It is a dangerous substance in terms of this synthetics that are added to it. There's some questions about the natural form of it, and there should be different penalties depending on if you're a teenager or you're an adult. And I think there should be higher penalties for organizations that sell it. So that'll be a debate. We'll have a debate about data centers. I introduced a bill too about a moratorium giving local political subdivisions, counties and townships and cities a break, so that we would just not do anymore for a year, so they could catch up with what kind of rules and procedures they should have. But that bill was defeated. But we have the non-disclosure bill, which will be there, which affects data centers. So those three issues probably will take most of the energy. We do have a technical correction. When we met last time, we did some things in residential property tax reduction. We tweaked a formula a little bit, which now we find out is difficult to implement by our county auditors. So we'll still keep it at $1,600. We're not going to change that, but we'll just tweak the formula a little bit so that it can be easily managed. So those are the issues. Now, other issues can come forward, but it would take a 2/3 majority of somebody in the House or the Senate to raise a new issue. And getting a 2/3 majority in the House or the Senate, pretty small odds.
Absolutely. Rissa Williams, you got about a half a minute left. Do you have any parting words of wisdom you want to let your constituents know about?
Parting words of wisdom. Do I have those? I'm actively recruiting my eventual replacement because Senator Mathern can't serve forever. Now we have term limits, and I agree with term limits. I know you've spoken about the ethics committee. I'm a strong proponent of an ethics committee, a solid ethics committee. We have sitting members of our legislature who have been convicted of crimes, and they should, if they're not going to step down, then as a group, we need to say, you need to leave.
Absolutely agree with that. Appreciate the time you guys were able to spend with us today. My name is Patrick Hart. If you guys have an opportunity to vote for Senator Mathern or Rissa Williams, I'd appreciate it if you did so. We'll see you next week.